I'm Carol Anne Riddell, and welcome to Book It with CA. We have got a terrific show for you today. We kick things off with actor Meg Tilly. You may know her from her iconic roles in the movies Agnes of God or The Big Chill, but she's also an accomplished author and a lot of fun to talk to. We recently chatted about her career, raising kids, and making it all work. She even turned the interview on me at one point. Take a listen. Meg, thank you so much for being here today. This is really a big thrill for me, so I really appreciate your time.
I'm so happy to be here, Carol Anne, and thank you.
So, so many people know you as the award-winning actor. I mean, The Big Chill, Agnes of God, just to name a couple of your movies. But you're also a very accomplished author. Your most recent book is The Runaway Heiress. I gotta say, I flew through it.
Yay.
So for people who might not be familiar with the plot, can you just tell us a little bit about the book?
Okay, so for 4 years, Sarah Rainsford, who's the heiress, is on the run from her abusive husband, Lieutenant Kevin Hawkins. And he's determined to do whatever it takes to keep her and her inheritance back firmly under his thumb. Right. So with I know, right? Because, okay, well, you've read it. So then she gets a new name, new ID papers, and she ends up as a personal assistant to Golden Boy Hollywood movie director Meg Tilly. And so you think, okay, now is she safe in this moneyed, exclusive enclave of Mulholland Hills? Or has she just thrust Mick into the crosshairs of the deadly threat that stalks her?
I do love all the twists and turns. And in that way, it really does read more like a suspense or a thriller, but it's also very much a romance, very much a romance. So what attracts you to that combination?
I like to turn pages, and I like that sense of, and I like those kind of but you know that you're going to be safe at the end. Like, that it's going to turn out. So you can go on the ride, and it's kind of like a roller coaster. And it's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? How's she going to get out? And it's also, for me, I think, just given my whole life, I like this kind of triumph from adversity, like that kind of to say, just keep going.
And you talked publicly that you had a difficult childhood. As a child, I know you've said it, being able to sort of make yourself invisible to some degree made you feel safer, made you feel protected.
Yeah.
And a little bit about that?
Well, our stepdad, if he was in a bad mood, everybody would get a beating, right? But I had really good hiding places. Like, I found a really good one behind the fridge, because this was old fashioned. It wasn't like people didn't have built-ins when you're poor, right? So I could slide in behind there. I was really skinny, and you have to trip your head sideways like this. And it was the best one, because he'd come charging out of the bedroom. If we're in the living room, zoom, the kitchen's right here, slip in. Or under the sink, where there's like a little, like the thing, and you wrap yourself around from the garbage this way and that, or climb a tree and hold really still, because, or jump out on the roof, and he's scared of heights. So I could just but if I held still, hide behind a pile of clothes, but just hold still under the bed, you're safe, right?
I'm sorry you went through all that. And
it may be me, right?
Well, we all have our things, right?
Yeah.
But I can certainly understand then why fame, and particularly sudden fame, would feel really scary on some level. I remember one anecdote told about being chased into a bathroom by fans in a department store when you had morning sickness, and it just felt crazy.
Yeah, that's what happened. And I was terrified of being famous, because being able to disappear and be invisible was my way to stay safe when I was growing up and as a young woman. So when that started happening and eyes were on me, I thought I didn't know what it meant. Yeah, it was scary. It was scary. I had nightmares about it.
I understand that you actually started as a ballet dancer, right? But then you had an injury, and so that's what sort of propelled you to acting. Is that right?
That's right. I was a ballet dancer. I was one of the dancers in Fame. That's how I got my SAG card. And then I was on full scholarship with Melissa Hayden, and I got dropped. Yeah. So then I was like, what do I do? I have no skills. I didn't go to university because I was a ballet dancer. What do I do? I have dyslexia. So I I changed numbers and stuff. So I'm like, what do people do who have no education? I can't be a teller in a bank. I can't be because my numbers are bad, And I thought, well, those people doing that acting thing, pretending to be somebody they aren't, I can do that. I've done that my whole life. Social workers come, we're happy.
Sometimes the way our life turns out, right? It's the
I
strangers
know.
that then propel us in a particular direction.
How did you end up doing what you do? Like, what was your process?
I always, first of all, I gotta say, I love how you turn the interview around.
Oh, no, I was curious.
I always wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a journalist more than I wanted to necessarily be on TV, but I always loved writing, reading books. Back to the movies. The Big Chill, I think it's such an iconic movie for so many people. It was this cultural touchstone, I think it still is. Yeah. Did you have any sense when you were doing that movie of sort of how special it was going to be, how magical it was going to be?
No, none of us did, except for maybe Larry. Like, none of us did. The first day I went, they wouldn't let me on the set because I had a beat up old Pinto with a big dent in the side. And I said, oh, I'm here for, and he goes, yeah, sure, get lost, kid. And I was like, no. So I was really worried. It's my first day of rehearsal. And so I had to turn around at the thing with the arm and go out, and I find a pay phone because we didn't have cell phones. And sure. I called the number of the thing in my back of my script, and Bill Hurt picked up, who I have most of my scenes with. And I'm like, hello, hi, it's Meg Tilly, and they won't let me in the gate. And I started to cry.
Oh my gosh, Meg.
I know, right? And immediately he's like, oh, you go back there. Which gate is it? I'll be there. And he went down there and he gave the guy help. And then he said, come with me. And I was so embarrassed because I was like, I cried, but I was so scared I was going to get in trouble. You don't want to be late. And sure. So then he was very protective of me, and our characters had that kind of anyway, but maybe everything would have been different if that guy had let me in the gate, and who knows? Like, you don't know.
Right. Did your whole life change after that movie?
Yeah, I was more famous.
Do people still like to talk to you about that role? I guess obviously, because here I am talking to you about it.
Yeah, people do. And it's funny because they had a 30-year reunion, and we went, and people flew from all over the world.
You played so many wonderful roles in addition to the Big Child. Is there anyone that's a particular favorite for you, or do you just sort of like, is that like asking, do you have a favorite child?
It's kind of like that, but there are ones that stick with you. So all my characters, I learned something from them. The ones that I got to actually put on film, and the ones that I didn't get to put on film.
So you stepped away from acting in the mid-90s to raise your children. I mean, I'm working mom. I get what that balance is like. Was that a difficult decision for you?
For me, it was difficult, yes, because there were things I enjoyed about my work, and there were things that were terrifying about it. Was it the right decision? I don't know. I thought it was because I wanted to be the kind of mom that I didn't have, where there was hot breakfast on the table every day, and there were cookies or cupcakes or whatever when they came home. And I would just create this safe haven for them to, have this place.
And I doubt that there's any woman on the planet with children who does not have that conversation with herself.
I couldn't be everything. No one can be everything. But I thought I have to do it to the best of my ability. They didn't have to be born. But the fact of the matter is that you give them other gifts when you're like you, like working mom, going out, doing stuff. And then they're like, oh, I can do that.
You've done so much, though. I got to imagine your children only think that, you're remarkable.
Well, they haven't. I actually don't know if they read my books and I had a thing where they couldn't see me in any of my films until they hit 18, and if they wanted to, then they could.
Right, so, I got it.
Because I didn't want to be bigger than life. Because a mom's already bigger.
I feel it's so accessible to them. Yes.
Yeah, right. As much as we try to give to our children, try to also give that to yourself, and stop the you should have this, or you messed up there, or sure, I would have liked to have, if I'd met somebody and married them and stayed for the rest of my life with that one person and loved forever and 50 years later, but I didn't meet that person until 21 years ago, and that's my husband now. But I went through a few,
Well, listen,
like,
I'm in your club. I'm in your club. So
yeah, so that's the thing, is you have this idea of what life is supposed to be, what a mom's supposed to be. That who wrote that? We
Right.
just do the best we can. And you see it much different when you're 61 like me, looking back, and you're like, oh honey, I just want to give her a hug. And so that's what I tell all the women who are watching this right now. Just give yourself a hug. And if you can forgive other people, then you certainly can forgive yourself for being human,
yes, absolutely. Meg, thank you so much for all this time. I can't tell you how much fun it was to meet you, how interesting it was. And, just I really appreciate that you spent all this time with us.
I really appreciate talking with you. And I feel like I know you because I've watched some of your interviews. And
Oh, that's kind of you. Thank you.
I was like, hi. That's like,
That's really kind of you.
yeah. But because of the way and the things I'm like, I feel like I know you. So maybe, someday we'll be in the same area. We'll have a cup of tea.
Boy, would I ever love that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Meg.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. My family would say I'm a little bit obsessive about being organized. Okay, maybe more than even a little. But as it turns out, getting rid of clutter might just make us happier people, according to best-selling author Gretchen Rubin. We sat down to talk about her recent book, Outer Order, Inner Calm. Gretchen, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be talking to you.
So you've written a number of books about happiness, the latest being Outer Order, Inner Calm. Let's start there. What do you mean by outer order?
For me, outer order is having everything the way that makes you feel comfortable so you can find what you need without having to look around, where you're not digging your way through a lot of stuff that you don't need, use, or want. You don't have things that are broken or aren't appropriate for their use. So some people want to end up with things extremely orderly, and some people don't need that level of orderliness in order to feel the inner calm of outer order.
So I think the notion of clutter for some people sounds rather simple. It's the idea of, there's a lot of stuff hanging around.
Yeah.
The notion of happiness seems like a complicated concept in many ways. So in your opinion, what's the link there?
Well, see, this is exactly what got me interested in writing the book Outer Order, Inner Calm, because I was talking to people for years about happiness. And as you say, it's a very transcendent subject. So many things come into it. And yet I noticed over and over when people talked about anything related to order, when they talked about making their bed every day, when they talked about figuring out a better way to be able to find their keys, they got so excited. And this really surprised me because I thought, in the context of a happy life, something like a crowded coat closet or an overflowing in basket is not consequential. And yet over and over people would say that when they got control over the stuff of their life, they felt more in control of their life generally. And so I wanted to explore that connection because I absolutely feel it myself.
Do you think that that's true for most people, that somehow decreasing clutter increases happiness?
Well, that's an important question because I think it's true for most people, but there are people who are truly clutter blind. You know it when you come across these people, and for them, they just don't care the way most people care.
Right.
But most people do care.
I sure do.
Yeah, I sure do too. Most people do care, though it's at different levels of how orderly it has to be for them to feel that sense of calm.
Yes.
It's rare to be clutter blind.
I think getting rid of clutter is so hard for some people.
Yes.
I mean, even in our family, we've got husbands, teenagers, dogs, there's stuff everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to talk about my husband's t-shirt drawer.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
But so what's the first simple step?
The first step, I think, is to think about, ask yourself, do I need it? Do I use it? Do I love it? Because there are things that we use that we don't love. And there are things that we love, but that we don't really use, but we love them. And there are things that we need, like maybe I live in a warm place. I don't often need long underwear, but every once in a while I need it. And so it's just nice to know that I have it in a drawer. But if you have something that you don't need it, you don't use it, you don't love it, you probably should give it away or get rid of it in some way. So I think that's a really good initial question.
And what's interesting to me in the book is also, it's not that you're advocating that all of us become minimalists.
No. I think the thing about minimalism is that I think it makes people feel like they need to really get rid of everything beyond just like the bare necessity. But a lot of people don't want to live like that. You know, some people are abundance lovers and some people are simplicity lovers. So simplicity lovers like bare counters and empty shelves and not much on the wall and like one little vase with one little flower. But abundance lovers like profusion and choice and a lot on the walls and a lot going on and piles and collections and profusion. And the idea that we should all be minimalist, it's like, well, a lot of people just, that's not what their preference is. So I think it's about creating the environment that you want, not trying to get down to a certain level that's like the right level to be.
And yet it's funny because I recently cleaned my closet.
Yes.
And I gave away a bunch of stuff.
Thrilling.
It is so exciting.
Yeah.
And I found afterwards that I felt like I had more stuff to wear.
Yes.
What is that?
That is so common. People will say, I feel like I have so many more choices. Because when you're not digging your way out of things that you don't love or that don't work or that don't fit, you feel like you have so many more possibilities because everything you see is something that you might actually wear.
Let's talk about some of your sort of simple tricks for getting started on this. I loved, for example, the X Factor because I am always convinced I will run into my college boyfriend.
There you go. So the X Factor is if you're trying to decide whether or not to keep an item of clothing, you imagine if I ran into my ex, would I be glad that I was wearing this?
Exactly.
And if you're thinking, no, I really wish that I was wearing something else, it's like maybe you don't want to keep that item of clothing anymore.
I loved the 1 minute rule and I'm using it all the time now.
Well, it's funny, I think of everything in the book, that's one of the ones that I've heard that people do use the most. And that's the idea that anything that you can do in less than a minute, you do without delay. So you hang up a coat instead of throwing it over a chair, or you print out a document and put it in the folder that it belongs to instead of just leaving it out on the counter. You put pens back in the pen cup. And this just gets rid of that scum of clutter that can sort of accumulate on the surface of life. Yes. And it's all things that are they're not difficult on their own, but they just make us feel weighed down when we walk in and we just see like, you know, just stuff everywhere.
We touched on this briefly, but I want to go back to it for a moment. You talk about how order can not only make us feel good, it can make us feel less bad.
Yes.
Which is different.
Yes. No, absolutely. And one of the things you see, like when people do have very disorderly surroundings, one of the things they say is like they're embarrassed to have people come over, so they don't want friends to stop by, or they don't want to entertain, or they might even sort of feel panicky if like the plumber needs to come by because they don't want somebody to come into their space. And that is a bad feeling when you feel like you can't show your home to the world. And so getting your outer environment under control can make you feel more welcoming too.
Let's talk a little bit more about happiness broadly, because you've written so much about it, including the Happiness Project, in which you kind of spent a year documenting how to increase your own happiness.
Yes.
Even though you said you were a pretty happy person to begin with.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. No, which makes me very typical, because all around the world, if you ask people, are you happy? Most people say they're pretty happy or they're very happy. So most people are pretty happy. But I definitely knew that there were things that I could do to be happier, and I wanted to try them all and see if it worked. Could I make myself happier if I tried all these things?
So,
and spoiler alert, yes, it did make me happier.
Gretchen, what's one thing that's different now in your life that you do differently that you didn't do before the Happiness Project that's had an effect on you, that's made you more happy?
We got a dog.
Okay.
We got a dog.
I love that.
We got a dog. And I knew from my happiness research that it's overwhelming. People with pets are happier. They're healthier. My daughters desperately wanted a dog, but I didn't want the work and the inconvenience. But they really, really wanted a dog. And so we got a dog. And it added so much to not only my happiness, but my whole family's happiness.
Yeah.
I knew my daughters would love it. I was surprised by how happy it made my husband.
Yeah. I could not agree more, by the way.
Right.
You know,
right.
But
yes.
That's
you
really
have a wonderful dog.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
We're attached to her.
Yeah, but again, there's overwhelming research showing that relationships make people happier, relationships with pets make people happier, and so it wasn't a surprise, but it was definitely something that I hadn't been willing to do before, and I'm very, very glad we did.
Any sort of just final piece of advice for people as they embark on the sort of happiness path themselves?
The thing I would say is there is no magic one-size-fits-all solution. And so, sometimes people get very discouraged when they think something should work, or when they keep trying something and it just won't stick. And often it's because they've just tried it in a way that's not right for them. They're just trying to understand, when have you succeeded in the past? What feels like a good fit for you, instead of trying to cram yourself into somebody else's idea of what it should be. I really think that's, for a lot of people, is the issue, is that they're just trying to do it in a way that's not right for them.
Thank you so much for all this time. It was so interesting.
No, thanks so much. I'm so happy to get the chance to talk to you.
And now it's time for Uncensored, our regular segment with award-winning columnist and author Linda Stasi. As usual, she has plenty to say about the book she's reading. Have at it, Linda.
Even though I'm more inclined to watch sci-fi than to read it, I just read 2 books that had me hooked but good. Both are about, oddly enough, interspecies love. The first, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, is about a nerdy junior high school science teacher, Ryland Grace, who's plucked out of obscurity to save the Earth. Why? Because he has an expertise in a field of science no one cares about, studying a particular organism that doesn't even do much, until it starts to eat the sun. He's forced into being a most reluctant astronaut when he wakes up from hibernation in deep space with no memory of who he is, where he is, or why he is where he is. Worse, all the other astronauts, like the pilots who fly the ship, are dead in their hibernation pods. What's a feller to do? He ends up hooking up with a terrifying blob of a space alien in another ship who is also trying to save his own planet from the dimming sun. This is a great read, kind of an interspecies, interstellar buddy romp filled with real science. It's funny and it's heartwarming and it's so good. The author, you might like to know, spent his entire career as a software engineer whose hobbies were, get this, relativistic physics and orbital mechanics, just like my hobbies. But he dreamed of being a writer, just like me. You'd think he'd be one hell of a dull science writer, right? Well, his first book was The Martian, okay? This one is also being turned into a movie starring Ryan Gosling. Actually, turning Ryan Gosling into a nerd will take some real science. Next up, Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. And it's a different kind of sci-fi love altogether. It's written from the point of view of Clara, a lifelike robot who's engineered to be a child's companion. Clara is picked out from dozens of other robots in the robot store by a little girl, Josie, who is very ill with an unknown disease. Clara is programmed to learn to become the perfect companion to a child by learning human emotions from the child. And she becomes Clara's most wonderful and empathetic friend. Solar-powered Clara believes that the all-powerful sun, who keeps her alive, can do the same for Josie. The weaker Josie becomes, the more Clara is determined to have the sun fix her. On the surface, this is a sci-fi with a twist, but it's also, and really, about love and companionship and what it means to be a human. When Josie grows up and no longer needs a full-time childhood companion, what happens to Clara? Does she end up on the trash heap with all the toys and dolls of Josie's childhood? Or does she grow up into a lifelong friend? Well, you have to read it to find out for yourself. I'm Linda Stasi, and I'm still uncensored. Yay!
Oh, yeah, it's wine time.
Thank you. It's
Cheers.
always wine time.
That's right. So, I just got to ask, you really loved Clara and the Sun?
I really liked Clara and the Sun. It's a little bit difficult, but the thing is, this book, for whatever reason, stayed with me.
Yeah.
I really felt something for the robot. It stayed with me. And I think that's what a good book is. It has to stay with you.
I mean, I did feel something for the robot, but I have to say that after a while, as a narrator, I felt like my GPS was reading me a bedtime story.
But your GPS was reading you a bedtime story. She's a robot.
I felt like the narration, listen, and let me just back up and say, I know that he is an incredibly acclaimed author, but I felt like the narration wasn't as nuanced as I needed it to be for the long haul.
See, the thing is, I found it interesting that he was able to stay in that head, which wasn't human. Trying to be human,
okay, that's
but
a
not
very good
human.
point.
The kid could have been more human, to tell you the truth, but the robot was all right.
Okay, so you also really liked Hail Mary, and I liked it too.
I
Very
loved
readable.
it. I loved it.
Yeah,
I
but
loved it. It
I
was
got
so
a little
much fun.
bogged down in all that science.
Well, I didn't, because I was the worst science student in the history of the world. So I really thought, how come this guy should be a junior high school science teacher, because I understand what he's saying.
Oh my gosh, well then that means I was an even worse science student than you were, apparently.
Well, maybe you were a good one and you knew it was not true.
No, it was definitely not that, Linda. It was definitely not that. And it definitely reads like a movie.
Definitely reads like a movie.
And it is being turned into a movie, as you said.
Right. I don't know how they're going to make Ryan Gosling into a nerdy junior high school science
Good
teacher.
luck.
Yeah, go back to Clara and the Sun for that one. You need a robot.
You know, the author does have one thing in common with us, apparently, though. Did you read this in his the little thing about him in the back?
About his?
He mixes a mean cocktail.
I don't actually mix
that.
a mean cocktail. I drink a mean cocktail.
Well,
I don't mix a mean cocktail.
I'm with you. That wraps up another chapter of Book It with CA. Thanks so much for joining us. A quick reminder to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. We would love to hear from you, especially if you disagree with Linda. We'll both be back next time. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. See you then.